Let's start off your week with something delightful, and that is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg and Harris campaign advocate Pete Buttigieg appearing on Fox News. And this is just the most wonderful thing ever whenever he appears on Fox News, because it's an opportunity for Fox News viewers to hear facts they rarely get to hear. And actually, not just that, but the entire Fox News infrastructure is built around preventing them from hearing, trying to construct a world that they can live in that isn't the world, the real one. And Pete Buttigieg did a nice job of articulating some of those facts. We'll start with this clip, and we have a bunch to watch from this interview.
And Vice President Harris is part of this administration and had a leading role, according to mainstream media, on handling the border.
Let's get real. Border crossings are down in the wake of President Biden's executive actions that he took after Congress failed to act.
So he could have taken action.
He wanted Congress to resolve that because that would have been more durable. But when Trump came in, talked Republicans out of their own bipartisan project because he didn't want the issue to get better. Remember, the worse things are at the border, the better things get for Donald Trump. So he has a vested interest in it remaining chaotic down there. I think this also helps to explain why he didn't exactly conclusively solve it when it was his turn. But I saw something else really important happening at the Republican National Convention on the border and the talk about immigration, which we all recognize is a problem, which is they tried to paint this narrative that if you live somewhere far from the border and immigration hasn't affected you personally, you need to think that immigration is a driver of crime. That was the real message. Immigration leads to crime.
Well, there are blue state governors and mayors who say every state is a border state now. That's Democrats.
Yeah,
saying.
And now they're saying, but what the false message of the RNC was that this is leading to an increase in crime.
Well,
and I think it's really important that we talk about crime.
Have been very high profile about people. If they had not been in this country
cases,
illegally,
this is my
people
point,
would still
right?
be alive.
Trying to make people think that crime is up when crime is down under Joe Biden and crime was up under Donald Trump. Now, I don't know how often that gets reported on this network. So if you're watching this at home, do yourself a favor and look up the data.
Well, we invite that.
Great. So if you look this up at home, you will know that crime went down under Biden and crime went up under Trump. And I think the violent crime, for sure. So I think the really important thing to ask is, why would America want to go back to the higher crime that we experienced under Donald Trump?
Okay, but they also may want to ask why they'd want to.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Like I said, I have much more to play for you, but to reflect on that first, I liked the way, and this is something that if I get to go on Fox News, I'll try to do as well, and I've wanted others to do for a long time, really make it noticeable that you're speaking to the Fox News audience because they're about to hear something they rarely get to hear, so that when they hear it, they consider why this is a fact, that he's encouraging them to go fact check, that they don't hear on the Fox News airwaves. And we've talked about this before with crime. Fox News provides for us this dark but quintessential example of something I talk about a lot, which is you can completely mislead people without ever telling an overt lie. To be clear, a bunch of overt lies are told on Fox News, and there are overt lies told about crime. But even some of the straight news reporting, as they call it, that is a little bit more factual, they're able to manipulate the beliefs of their viewers without saying necessarily, they don't have to say this, that crime's going up, but instead can hyperfixate on very provocative, often genuinely heartbreaking and painful anecdotes, and then hyperventilate about the perception of a problem without ever reporting on the actual facts about that subject. And so with crime, people shouldn't be feeling the stress that comes along with the idea that crime is spiking, because in reality, they are more safe now. They are more safe now than they were under the Trump administration. And Biden has overseen, the Biden-Harris administration has overseen a rapid plummet in crime, that running parallel to massive investments in public safety under their administration. And so consider that if you're a Fox News viewer. You don't have to immediately jump over and buy into every single thing that I or Pete Buttigieg believes, But at least consider why it is that one of the core narratives being pushed on Fox News, that you're becoming less safe and that crime's getting worse, is actually the exact opposite. And your guy, who's supposed to be the law and order candidate, law and order, to enunciate that, he both is the convicted felon and has the worst record on crime stats. And then, of course, it was brought up that this gets linked a lot of times to the border conversation. And as I continue to say, we should discuss how to address issues at the southern border. One of the reasons it's so upsetting that Trump encouraged Republicans to shoot down solutions, obstruct all progress on that issue so he could run the issue, is because it's an important one that we should be making progress on. But the fact that there are issues doesn't justify the lies that are told, like this is contributing to a spike in crime when it's not, or the horrific fear-mongering and dehumanization that takes place surrounding it. So let's have a secure border. Let's invest in solutions on that front and a broader immigration system without the horrific rhetoric we hear. If you are not already, yes, you, unless you are already, then not you, but anyone else, can you please make sure you're subscribed to the channel by clicking that subscribe button? Makes a huge difference. Easy, free, but I appreciate it greatly. Back to the video. Here's more from the same interview.
Affect them the most, whether we're talking about choice and her stance on defending a woman's right to choose versus Donald Trump, who eliminated a right to choose in this country.
Well, he sent it back to the states, to be fair.
Let's be very clear. He is proud of the fact that he demolished the national right to choose in this country, period.
But there are states that are figuring this out. I mean, there are some that are, I mean, it's nearly impossible, a 6-week ban or less. But there are others, there are states in this country that allow no restrictions up until the due date of a child.
There was a national right to choose in this country, law of the land, for 50 years, which the vast majority of Americans believed was the right thing to do. But Donald Trump made a promise when he was a candidate, one of the few promises he actually kept, by the way. You know, he didn't keep his promise of 6% economic growth. He didn't keep his promise to drain the swamp.
He did have a pandemic to deal with.
But even before the pandemic, America went into a manufacturing recession, which really hurt places like where I come from in the industrial Midwest. But anyway, my point is, he broke his promise for that kind of economic growth. He broke his promise to pass an infrastructure bill, right? He said he would do that. He failed to do it. The Biden-Harris administration got it done. He even broke his promise to that January 6th mob when he said, I will be at your side when you march down to the Capitol. But he actually did keep two promises. He kept his promise to destroy the right to choose in this country, and he kept his promise on tax cuts for the rich. And if you want to know what a second Trump term would be like, I would start by looking at those rare promises that he actually managed to keep.
He did say that he wanted to get rid of Roe v. Wade, but again, send it to the states where they are hashing this out
empower the states to eliminate women's access to abortion. And also, as you know, the Republican Party continues to be interested in a national abortion
which he's
ban.
disavowed.
This is absolutely an interview for Fox News that I honestly, with just the slightest, I shouldn't even do this, so I don't even really mean what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it. Just the slightest little bit of credit to Shannon Bream's show for allowing Pete Buttigieg to come on when they've experienced in the past, as they have it here as well, a complete devastation. She doesn't know what to do with the facts that Pete Buttigieg is throwing her way. And I really don't think, I dare to say, I know for certain actually, that this is not going to be the sort of the defense from Shannon Bream on behalf of Trump, an effective campaign message. When on one side you have Kamala Harris's campaign, when you have Democratic advocates, pro-democracy advocates, people like Pete Buttigieg saying Trump is responsible through the justices he got under the Supreme Court, as he promised to do, for the stripping away, the rolling back of women's rights that they'd had for decades. And if the defense, given that that's something that a lot of people justifiably care about and should punish Trump politically for, if the response is, but not every state has done an absolutely draconian, horrific law after that, not a great campaign message, I can say. And that's the best they have, as demonstrated there. Here's a little bit more.
Nominee.
And was she aware of how he was doing?
We're all aware of how he's doing. Our country has watched our president lead. And yes, we've also seen the fact that he's 10 years older than he was 10 years ago. But unlike Republicans, right, who in Trump's personality cult will take a look at Donald Trump and say he's perfectly fine, even though he seemed unable to tell the difference between Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi, even though he's rambling about electrocuting sharks and Hannibal Lecter, even though he is clearly older and stranger than he was when America first got to know him. They say he's strong as an ox, leaps tall buildings in a single bound.
Well,
we don't have that kind of warped reality on our side.
Well, voters...
on the contrary, the president confronted that reality in what must have been one of the most difficult decisions for an American president to make ever. And he did something that I don't think Donald Trump could even conceive of doing, which is putting his own interests aside for the country.
Well, voters said...
And this is something that I repeated a bunch of times while the debate was going on over whether or not Biden should stay in the race, which was, however this turns out and wherever you land on the debate, let's make sure we take note of now for history's sake and just for the pride we should feel about the movement we're a part of. Take note of the difference between how we handle our candidate and how MAGA handles theirs. Because it took a lot of courage for Biden, as we've discussed a bunch. High integrity move. And as Pete Buttigieg said, he did something Trump could never possibly imagine doing, which is putting the country above himself. Ultimately, that's what he did, and that was his decision, and that took a lot of courage. It also took courage for the movement that was backing him at the time. Our pro-democracy movement of Republicans, independents, and Democrats alike understanding the stakes of this election, to consider that, to have those doubts. And one of the characteristics that allowed us to do such a thing, have such a conversation and debate, was that we're not a cult. And we're not dedicated to one personality, but instead a set of outcomes that we believe are best for the country, most significant being the continuation of and the protection of our democracy. And so in the interest of that, we had a debate, a conversation, and ultimately Biden decided to step off the ticket for those outcome-related goals, not prioritizing personality as MAGA does. You could never imagine MAGA abandoning Trump because it's a cult of personality, and that's one of the key characteristics of it, is that they will dedicate themselves to him instead of an outcome. Because you can imagine, if you just cared about policy outcomes, you could find somebody, get this, who's not a convicted felon, who's not a civilly liable rapist, who didn't try to overturn a democratic election, I should say, and a lawfully executed one, who wasn't caught on a recording talking about sexually abusing women, who didn't mishandle a once-in-a-lifetime crisis, etc., 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 who still had similar policy positions. You could find someone without that baggage who would have a better shot of winning and wouldn't be such a disaster in office. But MAGA didn't choose that because it's not about those policy outcomes. It's about this personality. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments. If you want to get extra content daily, you can do so by clicking the join button below. And if you want to rep your Luke Beasley Show merch, the logo should be somewhere on that computer. You can do so by going to lukebeasleymerch.com, or on YouTube you can see the little pop-up merch options to choose from.